it was very, I would say, scary, which scary is a great thing. I was told a long time ago, but if it doesn't scare you, you're not doing enough. What's the succession plan? How are we going to grow this? Where else are we going to get? Am I going to take that employee that he's my number one employee? He's great, but I'm afraid to build him up because if I build him, he'll leave. So leadership is being a visionary more than anything.
You're listening to the Limitless Leadership Podcast, the podcast designed to help automotive repair shops learn how to lead, coach, train, and manage their team better by sharing proven techniques and thought-provoking interviews from industry leaders. Are you ready to transform your leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results? Let's get ready for liftoff. It's time to go from great to greater. Here's today's episode.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I got another great guest today. Before we get started, before I introduce our guest today, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all the things you need to on social media to help this podcast reach people and build leaders. That's, of course, our mission statement is to reach people and build leaders. Don't forget to go to YouTube, hit that subscribe button at The Bearded Leader. And speaking of a leader, I got another great leader today. I'm joined today by a friend of mine. He is a fellow entrepreneur. He's the co-founder of the ADAS network. He's also the owner of Andy Tirado LLC. So for the namesake of his LLC, I'm joined by Mr. Andy Tirado. Andy, thanks for being here on the Limitless Leadership Podcast, my friend.
Thanks for the opportunity for me to join and come on board and share some words and share some time. I'm really looking forward to this.
Awesome. Well, hey, we're excited for it as well. Speaking of words, I know you got a lot of great words of wisdom. You're really good at what you do. You are making an impact and making an imprint in this industry, and I'm excited for the audience to hear all about what I'm talking about. But before I share some thoughts, I'm going to ask you to share with our audience who you are, what you do, and how you do it.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, my name is Andy Tirado. I am the owner of Andy Tirado LLC, which is a consulting firm where we handle multiple areas in the industry, not just automotive, but we have specialists in other areas as well. We are very heavily on the automotive side just because of my background, but I'm also John Maxwell certified and all that fun jazz. So we want to make sure that we're tackling this not just as individualized, focused markets and niche markets per se. It has to be a global effort. The change comes from the bottom up and the top to the bottom. It goes both directions. So that's what I do at Andy Tirado LLC. We do this in multiple languages, also multiple countries, and not just the U.S. We span out to Puerto Rico, St. Martin, Mexico. So we have some international offerings as well with some of our clients. Outside of that, the ADAS network is a newer venture. We launched that in March 10th. We knew that there was a gap when it came to the ADAS subject matter. It didn't matter what it was, OE, aftermarket, whatever tool you were using, once again, top to bottom mentality and making sure that we're driving the industry, keeping everybody safe, things are being done correctly, and that information gap was being filled, technical as well as ownership side, because a lot of shops would say, hey, this is the new trend, this is the new technology, I have to do this. They purchase, spend $45,000 to $85,000 worth of equipment and have no clue how they're going to make their ROI and how they're going to go ahead and structure that out, how to work with the insurance companies. So we wanted to make sure that we were fulfilling that need and answering those questions in a much more efficient way to where everybody on the team, everybody in our company has been or is currently involved in the ADAS industry. So no matter who you talk to, down to customer service, they understand and can empathize with that particular customer at any given point.
Andy, the majority of our listeners are in the automotive repair industry, but some aren't, and some are fairly green to the industry. If you were to describe or explain what ADAS is in layman's terms to the person listening who doesn't fully understand this 4-letter acronym that you're sharing.
Absolutely. So ADAS is Advanced Driver Assistance Systems. In reality, when we look at Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, we can go back down to ABS brakes, just simple automatic brake control, right? Anti-lock brake systems. From there, what we call ADAS today is more on the collision mitigation, so the automatic stop systems, adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, blind spots, the bird's eye view, 360-degree, parking maneuvers and parking aid. That's what all constitutes ADAS, and we're seeing more and more push towards that. We actually have, most people don't know this, we treat it as a safety system, but we really won't have it, the very first true ADAS safety system, until 2029, when it has been mandated to have automated emergency brake on all cars, period. So now it's become a standard. Before that, this is all optional. It's all under test bed, which was why it makes it more complicated.
Hey folks, running an auto repair shop, it's tough. We know that. And between managing repairs, keeping customers happy, and handling front office tasks, there's never enough time in the day. That's where Hub Shop Solutions comes in. Hub takes the burden off your team by building fast, accurate repair estimates and handling extended warranties, so you can focus on what really matters, running a profitable, efficient shop. With Hub, you free up your team, you boost efficiency, and you increase profits. So sign up now and get free onboarding. Visit hubshopsolutions.com to schedule a demo today. Hub Shop Solutions. Unlock your shop's full potential. All right, folks, as you know, great leadership isn't about doing everything the best. It's actually about having the right partners in your corner to build your shop's success. It's about putting the right team in place. It's about choosing the right vendors to make you a pro, making pro moves. And when I think about the pros, I think about shop marketing pros. The know, like, and trust factor, that's a real thing. And Shop Marketing Pros understands that. That's why I want to recommend Shop Marketing Pros to become your marketing partner in your shop. They get to know, like, and trust you and your business to then help your audience get to know, like, and trust you too, and bring your shop to the next level. So when I talk about making pro moves, this is the kind of move I'm talking about. This is the kind of standard-setting partnership that's going to elevate your shop. So if you're ready to become a pro in your shop, visit shopmarketingpros.com and partner with the best.
Because everybody has different systems, right? So that's the gray area. That's what ADAS is. And with us trying to go more on autonomous drive, ADAS really is here to stay. It's not something that's, flying by the wayside. It's not just a trend that's going to, climb and drop. It is going to be absolutely mandatory.
So Andy, if I understand you correctly, what you're sharing is that ADAS up until 2029 is kind of being tested, and there's not necessarily one right or wrong way, but there's not one definitive way. But you're saying in 2029, it's going to be mandated that all cars have it, and also it's going to be a one specific way. Am I understanding you correctly?
Correct. So the difference is in 2029, when we talk about the mandated system, there's now an SAE standard, the Standard Automotive Engineering numbering to it, right? So now there's a set protocol and a process along with some ISO standards built into it, which means that the system has to be the same. They have to function in the same way. There's a specific wavelength on the radar or cameras. Right now, it's under test bed, like I said. So it's optional. So everybody's testing different systems, different cameras, different radars. So there's a right and a wrong way to service them. Now, there's no set way, so there's no standardization yet. The difference is that as we continue to progress, and we always saw this coming, we knew that it was going to be this way, to find what that secret sauce was going to be, what was going to work best when it came to radars and lidars. I'm sure a lot of the listeners have heard of these terms thrown out there, may not understand it to its entirety, but that's also something that we provide. So as a service, right, we're there to provide the information on that through videos, through forum standpoints, direct live support, and all that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that, Andy. You mentioned you are a fellow entrepreneur. You just launched as a co-founder of the ADAS network, but you also have your own consulting firm, Andy Tirado LLC. I'll ask you, share with the audience what it was like for you to start your own company, and then you said, "Hey, you know what? I wanted more. I'm going to go ahead and co-found another company as well." What was it like for you to transition into business ownership and specifically entrepreneurship?
So that's a very interesting question and a very interesting scenario and path, because I understand what I was bringing to the industry. I always wanted to put into that. I wanted to make an impact in the industry. My original goal was to be an engineer. Never really fulfilled the schooling. By the time I got into work, enrolled into college, they didn't have night courses. I already had a full-time job. I was about to get married. So all those dreams kind of got put on pause. Then in the background, I worked with engineering through other jobs. So I knew what I was putting in was sufficient, but I wanted more, of course. Kept growing, did the corporate ladder, and I burnt out twice. So that's what really led me towards the entrepreneurship and building a company. Now, the funny thing is that you and I have had this conversation in the background probably about a year ago. The whole idea about launching my company was because I burnt out, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and build a company, only take on so much work. And the original idea was I'm not going to have any employees. I'm going to keep it real nice and simple, very manageable. Everything's remote. then I started finding out that because I was no longer burnt out and I was managing things, they were at my own stress levels, and I had more control over that. And I was working with the clientele that I had, and they were a lot more understanding, and it was under my set standards, right? It allowed me to really look at, well, there's this other need that needs to be handled. And yes, I didn't want to burn out again, but it would be irresponsible of me to not do anything about it. So it was very, I would say, scary, which scary is a great thing. I was told a long time ago, if it doesn't scare you, you're not doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I would like to share with your listeners. If you're doing something, if you're working, if your business isn't making you slightly nervous, you're not doing enough. You're playing it safe, and it's fine. Don't get me wrong. Playing it safe is good, but playing it safe only allows you to grow so much and only allows you to build the impact so far. And sometimes we'll to play it safe, we'll have that nearsighted goal, which is great, but we need to make sure we're setting up those goals for long term, right? What's the succession plan? How are we going to grow this? Where else are we going to take? Am I going to take that employee that he's my number one employee? He's great, but I'm afraid to build him up because if I build him, he'll leave. And that's a lot of things, a lot of conversations that I have with business owners that it's an incorrect mentality to have of anything. I want to build him up, but instead of leaving, hey, make him the owner of my business, make him, CEO of my business, make him a manager, make him grow within my company. That is a big gap that I see when I do a lot of the business development and business consulting, recruiting, retention conversations, is that as not just automotive, just as whole, as corporate, we tend to bring more people from the outside than from growing within. And a lot of times that information, those ideas happened internally. Another subject matter that's very controversial is ADHD. So I am a prime and perfect example. The more you talk to me, the more we talk, you notice I'm all over the place. And a lot of times that gets criticized. But it also creates the most productive work environment. Because now if you have a person that does have ADD or ADHD, it is different. It can be challenging. But knowing how to pivot and utilize that could actually help grow your business. Not to mention, there's a lot of that out there, and that identification with that potential customer, with that additional colleague, really, really sets the bar apart. And pivoting on that really is another subject matter that I go across and work with schools to make sure that they're emphasizing not letting ADD or ADHD be a handicap. It's not a crutch. It's actually a superpower.
Yeah, love that. I love that you're sharing that it's not a crutch, it's a superpower. There's a lot of these diagnoses that are put on us, these labels that are put on us, and we allow those labels to become our limitations. But when we can view things differently, we start doing things differently. And when we understand how to manage this and how to manage that and how to utilize these special things about us that make us unique, that make us one of one, it allows us to really grow and develop through our superpowers. There's no longer an inconvenience. It's an opportunity, and it's a superpower. It's not a crutch. That's one thing that sets yourself apart, Andy. You also mentioned you're bilingual, you're multilingual, you are John Maxwell certified. I have a high level of respect for anyone who's Maxwell certified. What else? What else sets yourself apart from others?
So you mentioned the bilingual and the multilingual. That is another standpoint. So when I go into a company, that is something that has always been kind of there, controversial to an extent in some places, and a lot of times the whole bilingualism can be in places you don't expect it. So when I first came into the training aspect and doing more national training, I worked for a company that was called Federal Mogul. Federal Mogul has been absorbed by a couple times now. We know the part of the Garage Gurus, and they were Tenneco and mixed into Atlas. So there's been some growth and changes into there, and understanding that where you least expect it is where you're going to have that growth. I have done Spanish training out in the middle of Iowa. And a lot of people would, and I was the first one, I'm guilty of it. It's like, why am I going to Iowa for Spanish? Like, Iowa doesn't make any sense. New York, California, Texas, Florida, those are the ones that you throw the dart. Those are actually the last takers, believe it or not, to get into some of the Spanish training. So sometimes you're like, well, I'm in the middle of the Midwest. I don't need any kind of Spanish training. You'd be surprised. And the reason I've actually understood was on that trip, they actually put it all over the radio. It was in the local radio station. They had it on the local TV stations. They had a press release. It was a really, really big deal.
Nice.
Now you can only imagine realizing what that did for that market and what that did for the shops, right? It really bounced their growth, right? Because they knew that they were being catered to, they were understood. Now the actual consumer was seeing that there was money being invested into training, and it really made sense because you go, "So what's in Iowa?" Well, there's a bunch of farmland, right? Well, perfect. Well, who usually works the farms? And then you have the aha moment. It's like, oh, now that makes sense. So that's been obviously a very interesting growing path. When I did it with one of my clients is Napa. I used to work internally with Napa. Pennsylvania, York, Pennsylvania, to be specific, was the very first market to take Spanish training. Once again,
Wow.
areas where you really don't expect it. It is really, sometimes you have to think out of the box to really grow. That leap is a leap of faith, and it seems like you're taking a jump on the wrong platform, and you come to find out that parachute was always on your back, right? So
Yeah, that's good.
definitely there. Something else that I also do very differently is when it comes to training. They say, "Well, Andy, what do you do? Like, what kind of training?" Well, I believe in bottom up, top to bottom, and vice versa. So when I work with non-corporatized clients, right, because I have a lot of corporate clients, when there's non-corporatized clients, I also make sure if I'm assisting a shop, it is a full shop experience, full shop training. So we're handling technical training, so we can do that in all subject matters, engine, ignition, diagnostics, EV, ADAS, no matter what, because we need to make sure we're getting them trained and kept up to date and doing things correctly and finding ways to be more efficient, but also how to change their mentality and how to have a leadership mentality. So we're trying to build the leaders from the bottom to the top as well. So I need to make sure that technician is viewing their employment and viewing their job as more meaningful than simply just turning a screw, right?
How do you? I'm going to jump in real quick, Andy, because I'm curious. How do you do that? Like, how do you shift someone's perspective to help them understand they are a leader? They're not quote unquote just a technician. They're a leader. They have the opportunity to influence those around them. What are you doing as a trainer to help them understand that level of influence they have?
So outside of just technical training, we take some time to really analyze the impact of what they're doing. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. So a lot of times when it comes to leadership training and leadership conferences, it is always offered heavily to ownership and the entrepreneurs and managers. Like, right, managers is right where it slows down. Then the managers tend to bring in the shop advisors, right? So you have your service writers, and it kind of stops right there. You have that ceiling. So it's like the floor and the ceiling are right there. So right when you get to the service advisor, it kind of ends. Well, the technician doesn't matter. Like, they're not talking to people. Well, they do, number one, and they can. Some don't. I know I'm very, very different, but when I worked dealership, I had a customer base that only spoke to their service advisor for their welcome, their greeting. That's it. From there on, the ticket went back to me as a technician, and my customers didn't want to talk to the service advisor. They was like, "No, I want to get it straight from Andy." And then the other part is learning how to communicate correctly. So that's another part of how do I get into that mindset? It's like understanding and analyzing culturally, right? And that's something else that I also, when I go in and go train somewhere, I talked about Iowa, right? Understanding what is farmland. I do a market study. So, who is your customer? Where's your market? Don't just see it as a body. Don't do what everybody else does. Don't go into the corporate world where it's just a number. No, they're not just numbers. Okay. How can we cater to that where, once again, they feel that they are understood? So when I would talk to those customers, if it was a teacher, I looked to change terminology and explain how the car things worked for a teacher's aspect. So if there was a elementary grade teacher, we'd talk about crayons and rulers and students and benches and seats, and we'd find a way to make that work. If it was a doctor, then I was talking more on doctor terms. So yes, there's a lot of, back study, some own self-improvement that needs to happen. But then they understand how important that is, how important it is. The knowledge that they have and what they do isn't fixing a car. It is keeping a family fed. Because if that car is off the road, we think about fleet, right? Fleet, we understand that, and they know that time is money. If the truck is off the road, it's thousands, if not millions of dollars that's going down the drain. But fixing one car is a difference about a mother or a father getting to work, a child going to school, being able to transport somebody who, Lord forbid, and I empathize and feel for anybody out there who has a child that has special needs or has medical conditions. That vehicle working properly has to be able to get to the hospital, has to get them to the therapies, get them to the clinics. So when you change that perspective, because we get zoned in, we get honed and we get our blinders, right? Or this is my job, A to Z. I go in, I clock out. I don't. So you hear this term a lot from technicians, and it's not great. But if it's fixed or not, I don't see it from my house. My car works. So we change and shift that mentality. We also shift the mentality of treating cars differently. So if I'm working on a Mercedes versus working on a Volkswagen Beetle from 1962, there really is no difference. Okay, it's still a mechanical aspect. There's electronics, and to that person, if that's all they can afford, that's their Mercedes. The Mercedes, they may treat it as, just a throwaway vehicle. Who knows? But it's treated with the same amount of respect. And also communication. So in this, right, a lot of it had to be with communication. The biggest issue that I see with technicians in leadership is a failure in communication. There's no understanding to the levels as you go up, which is why when I do my private contracts and not corporate contracts, right, my only holdback, right, so my condition is I don't train your technician, we train the whole shop. Because if I train the technician how to improve and how to shift these numbers and how to make it better, but the service advisor doesn't understand where they're coming from, and the technician doesn't understand where the service advisor is coming from, but then also the owner, because that's the other part, that's the controversial part. So I talk to the technician, service advisor, service manager, and my biggest rule is I have to have a conversation with the owner. I don't care if it's a 1 hour conversation. At the end of the day, it's just the shortest part of it. Usually that's not the case. Usually I'll have the shortest part of the training with the owner, and that's followed up by me coming back and visit again or having phone call consultation conversations, because I want them to understand that if they're investing into training, it is not just a one-time, hey, it's just I'm putting into here and it's a tax write-off and I'm putting into the technician, he's supposed to make this happen. No, it is a whole shop perspective. Everybody needs to understand each other. Another element, and I'll let you jump into the next question, is DISC analysis. So as leaders in the corporate world and once again management, we've heard of DISC assessments, right? So DISC assessment is going to be how, as individuals, what kind of characteristics do we have? How do we speak? How do we think, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody's really taking DISC analysis down to a technician. And then you can't figure out, well, why does this technician not work? Why can't these people get along? Or why do I have a shop full of A-techs, right? They're all phenomenal, but they're always down each other's throat, or they're always combating versus the advisor. They're butting heads. Mm-hmm. Understanding everybody's wavelength is important. You have to have a mix. So those are conversations that happen down from the technician all the way up to the ownership. And it's amazing how something as simple as that, communications, outside of the technical, outside of the numbers, outside of sales, right? Because that's the main focus. Shifting that mindset changes the environment completely for, in this case, talking about automotive, for the shop, which then makes it more productive, then makes more money. And there's also a better job life quality. That is the biggest challenge.
I love what you just described, Andy. And something I do in my own coaching is preach this concept of how connection creates engagement, and engagement is what increases performance. But if we're going to increase performance, we've got to focus on that connection or lack of at times, because what we know is that 70% of employees are disengaged at work. Conversely speaking, 80% of people will tell you that they're fully engaged when they receive meaningful feedback at least once per week. So when you're talking about feedback, whether it be in the form of one-on-ones or toolbox talks or daily huddles, just in general, you're talking about communication. And anyone who's listening, we all understand and relate to this concept of that invisible wall between the advisors and technicians, for example, and the importance of making sure we're all on the same page and we're all speaking the same language. We all understand each other. We're not reacting to each other, but we're speaking with each other and we're responding. We're listening to understand versus listening to react. And this is where a lot of shops struggle. And so I like the idea of getting everyone involved, because what we do know is that when there is a breakdown in communication, voids tend to get created, and oftentimes negativity fills those voids. I like the fact that you're also pairing this concept of leadership for technicians, because I 100% agree with you. Any leadership training I do, any leadership speaking engagement that I have, or if I'm going to a conference, rarely do I have a technician in my class. And that's not by my design. It's just that's the way that a lot of conferences are set up. And I don't know that even a technician recognizes, hey, maybe I should be going to this class. Now, granted, there's a lot of great technical classes out there. So, and they're happening during leadership classes and other management classes. However, my hope is that we can start shifting a paradigm and helping everyone recognize anyone who's at this conference, doesn't matter what your role is, doesn't matter what your tenure or experience is, you're a leader. So you belong in the leadership classes as well, or maybe even in lieu of others. But I'll ask you, Andy, to share in your own words. We know that John Maxwell. I'm a friend. I say a friend, but John Maxwell. He always introduced, "Hey, I'm your friend, John Maxwell." Right. So John Maxwell is a big influence for me as well. And his definition is leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. What is Andy Tirado's definition of leadership, and what does it mean to you?
So leadership is being a visionary more than anything. So as your job as a leader is to be that visionary when everybody else has the blinders, everybody else has that 5-foot view, and everybody else is frustrated and they feel they're at wit's end, they're having a hard day, that car's not working right, the customer's declining the work, or hey, we're supposed to have work coming in, it's raining, so now the traffic is slowed down. The job of the leader is to make sure that you pick up the load. So that's the difference between a leader and a manager, right? We've seen tons of pictures on the internet. I'm sure everybody's seen it, where you have the Egyptian, slave runner that's cracking the whip versus the one that jumps down and helps push the boulder. So as a leader, we need to be that visionary. We need to be that person that's lifting people up. As a leader, I am a Christian. I'm a God-fearing man. I'm an absolute Christian. And I feel that we are called to be the light in the dark, number one. But if Jesus was able to allow his feet to get washed and walked all over to preach the gospel, who are we as individuals lesser than a higher entity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then not want to roll up our sleeves and say, well, that's not my job.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've heard it a lot of times. Well, that's not in my job description. And ever since I was young, I always had the mentality, I'm getting hired for this, but if they tell me to scrub the toilet, I'm scrubbing the toilet. I'm an expensive toilet scrubber at this point. That's on the owner's decision at that point. But if I have to do it, nothing is beneath us. So as leaders, we have to pick up that load. We need to make sure that we're treating our business and our employees like family.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're head of household, which as a leader, you're the head of the business, or you're head of household, you're supposed to pick up, your children, and you're supposed to pick up your spouse.
Yeah.
So that's the same way we need to treat our business and our employees. When our employees are down, we need to lift them up. We need to really understand what is the root of the problem and how can I build into this. And sometimes it's a simple conversation that fixes their whole ordeal. So my definition of leadership is a visionary and also a person that is going to lift up their team.
Andy, that is so good, man. Thank you for sharing that. We are all really good at identifying what's going wrong and what this individual is doing wrong in our shop, but we're not always the best at highlighting the good. And we know that not every day is going to be a good day, but we can still find the good in every day and everyone. And so being able to recognize versus reprimand, being able to focus on the good versus the bad, being able to focus on the connection versus the content, these are all perspective shifts that I think every leader can stand to make in order to make a huge difference in the lives of those around them. It's not just professionally too, because as a leadership coach, that when you can impact your team at work, their home life is better as well. Their spouses feel it. They come home and they're able to have a healthy work-life rhythm. I don't call it a balance, but a healthy work-life rhythm. They're able to go home and their spouse recognizes the type of fulfillment that they're getting and the rewarding nature that they're getting at work through uplifting, through an uplifting style of leadership from their owner or their service manager or leader or whoever it is. We know that everyone in the shop has the ability to influence those around them, which makes everyone a leader. But it's so important that we recognize why we should be uplifting people and recognizing people versus reprimanding. I'm not saying reprimanding is a bad thing, but know that there is a time and place for both. And this industry especially deserves way more recognition than reprimanding, in my opinion. I'll ask you to share also, Andy. A second question I always ask on this podcast is, what is the best advice you've ever received from a coach or a mentor? How would you answer that question?
Ooh, so there's been a lot of people in my life that I have listened to. So as a youngster, we all have been there, right? We don't listen to everything, and we think that we know it all. The older I get, the more I find out I don't know, which is ridiculous because everybody, as a coach and as a leader and as trainer, everybody always says, oh, you know everything. And I really don't like that. I get uncomfortable because I don't feel that I do. I feel that I continue to learn, and I try to make sure they understand that they're on the same path. We're on a continuous learning path. Now, when it comes to influential words, there were There were a couple. I remember I had one mentor told me that no matter what, you're right. No matter what you say, you're right.
Explain that.
If you can't do it, you're not going to do it. Now, if you say you're going to succeed, if you say you're going to have a victory, guess what? You're going to push towards it and you're going to have it. So if you say you can have a 2.5, 3.5, $6.5 million company, well, then yes, you're going to work for it. When you say you can't, you've set your own limitations.
That's good.
Like the flea concept, right? The jumping flea in the jar. If you think that you can only jump so high, now you've conditioned your mindset to only do that. So that was one of the first pieces of advice that I was told, and it was phenomenal.
Wasn't it Thomas Edison who said, whether you think, no, or Henry Ford, I think it was Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
Same kind of concept, right?
100%. Another one was, and it was in Spanish. This is, I was out in Venezuela when this happened. This is, he who doesn't dare nor wins nor loses. So if you never put yourself out there, if you don't try, you won't lose. You have nothing to lose because you didn't try. But if you didn't try, you also didn't find out if you had the opportunity to win, to be victorious. So sometimes, like I said, going out and making that leap of faith, right, which can be very, very scary, can be dangerous too, depending on how, what kind of risks you're taking into account. So be mindful of what you're doing, right? Assess your risks and your limitations to an extent. But sometimes it's a close your eyes, put your faith in the Lord, and I'm going to make this happen, right? Power of prayer is definitely a very, very big thing in my life. So that was something else that I was told a long time ago. And that was actually from my ex-father-in-law. It's just kind of go to show where that was. I had a very high respect for that man. Yeah. And another influencer was my aunt in my life has always told me these words. And she says, they never write about the coward. So as you read the book, you hear all these things, like they always talk about and they write about the brave person. Now, the difference between the coward and the person who's brave is not much of a difference, because a lot of people assume that the coward is scared and the person who's brave isn't. Okay, but the man with bravery is fearless. No, he has fear. Trust me, he's shaking in his boots. The difference is that he didn't let fear become his obstacle. That was not his wall. That was not a stopping point. You pushed through it. So if you want to do something impactful, sometimes you just have to push through. You just have to muster it up and be brave, because they'll never talk about the coward.
It's okay to do it scared. And we know that the similarity between faith and fear is that they both believe in a future that hasn't happened yet. So why not choose faith?
Yeah, absolutely.
Andy Tirado, thank you so much for being on the Limitless Leadership Podcast, my friend. My last question for you is, how can our audience get in touch with you?
So you can go visit my website, andytirado.com. You can contact me directly. I have a 1-800 number up there. Personal mobile number, I should put that out. I have no fear in that, 314-827-9110. That is my mobile number. If you want to call me and just say, hey, Andy, I heard you, can I have some words, or you just, need a friendly, just say hello. It's like, hey, Andy, I'm feeling down. I need somebody to talk to. Sure, I'll be that person as well.
Awesome.
Just, give me some time, of course, if I'm in a training or meeting or whatnot, but I do promise I always return calls. I always return emails. You can contact me at Andy at andytirado.com. That's my main email. So I'm an absolute open book. Once again, my goal, my high, I was going to say my drug, I would say, is making sure that at the end of the day, I'm improving somebody's life. If it's further and it's higher than where my life is, that part doesn't matter. It really is a selfless act. I'm not going to say that, it's a free offering, because, we have to pay bills and mortgages, but the money doesn't fill me. What really fills me is how it impacts and what it achieves in the end. I want to be able to, we talk about legacies sometimes, and be able to say goodbye to the world when it's my turn to go ahead and join the Lord in heaven. And make sure that when they ask you, what did you do with your life? And I say, well, this is what I did. If you look down there, there's a bunch of people that are making a good living for their life. They have their family. They built their family. They got out of whatever rut they were stuck in, whatever situation they were able to climb up and do something because I was able to help them be it by a couple of words, by techniques, tactics, whatever help it was. That's what really fills me. I've worked all the way from the vocational aspects. I've worked on, education from high school level all the way up to adult education and leadership. And in the end, they're all different examples and different dynamics, but the high is still the same.
Andy, man, you just dropped a lot of wisdom on this show. A lot of great nuggets. I'm excited to see all of the great takeaways that our audience is getting from this show and the different comments that are shown on social media. Man, thanks again so much for being here. Hopefully this isn't your last time on the Limitless Leadership Podcast, but thank you again for being here, Andy.
No problem. Thanks for having me once again.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in yet again. As you know, every episode we look to transform our leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results. So thanks for being here. Have a great day, everyone. Don't forget to smile today. Tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. I'm Josh Parnell, reminding you to keep leading well.